The city still pulsed far below when Logan Pierce stepped out of the private elevator and into the hush of his penthouse. His shoes clicked once against the polished marble floor, then silence. The kind of silence that was too clean, too sharp, like glass that had never been touched. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the room, framing Manhattan's skyline in ribbons of cold light. The space was immaculate, everything in its place, chrome, steel, glass. It was the kind of home photographed for magazines, admired but never truly lived in. Logan loosened his tie, every motion efficient, almost mechanical. 14 hours at the office had drained him, but it was nothing new. Deadlines, negotiations, board members with sharp smiles, all those battles felt easier than what awaited him here. In the boardroom, silence meant victory. In this home, silence felt like a weight pressing against his chest. He placed his phone on the counter, its screen flashing with unread messages, dozens of them. Charlotte Hayes, his board chair, had called 3 times already. He didn't answer, not yet. For once, he wanted a moment of stillness, a breath before plunging back into the noise. He tugged off his jacket, laid it neatly over the back of a chair, and turned toward the hallway. The penthouse was still, dimly lit, the air faintly humming with the low vibration of the heating system. Then he froze. It was faint at first, almost like a trick of the mind, softer than the hum of the vents, lighter than the distant horns drifting up from the streets below. A sound not meant to be here, a lullaby. His heartbeat faltered. It was no recorded playlist. This was a voice, low, warm, steady, a melody so gentle it threaded through the steel and glass like sunlight slipping through blinds. Logan's jaw tightened. His daughter was not supposed to be in anyone's arms but his, and no stranger shoot. He'll be in this house. He moved down the hallway with precise, silent steps, his hand brushing the edge of the wall as though anchoring himself. The door to the nursery was cracked open, just enough for the light to spill through in a pale, amber sliver. Logan pushed it wider, and there it was, the sight that made his breath catch. A woman sat in the rocking chair, her skin a deep, warm brown, her uniform plain and unremarkable, yet her presence filled the room with something the cold walls had never held: calm. In her arms lay his daughter, Maya, a bottle tilted at just the right angle in practiced hands. The baby's eyelids drooped heavily, her tiny fingers curled around the woman's thumb. Logan's throat tightened in a way he didn't expect. Not anger, not entirely, but something closer to dissonance. The sight was wrong, foreign, and yet unbearably right. He should have felt outrage at the intrusion, but instead he felt something slip inside him, a piece of control cracking loose. "Who are you?" His voice was low, precise, every syllable shaped like a blade, the cadence of a man who always commanded answers. The woman looked up. Her eyes were steady, brown and unshaken. "Marissa Cole, temporary nanny from Bright Care. They said you needed someone tonight." Her voice was even, carefully measured so as not to startle the child drifting into sleep against her chest. Logan stepped closer, every instinct telling him to take Maya back into his own arms. But before he could, his daughter shifted, her cheek pressing deeper into Marissa's elbow, sighing through her nose in contentment. She clung tighter. That simple gesture, his daughter choosing to stay where she was, hit harder than any boardroom betrayal. Logan swallowed. He had told himself countless times that no one touched his child, that the world was too sharp, too cruel to trust anyone else. Yet here she was, his daughter, resting in a stranger's arms as if safety had been hers all along. The lullaby trailed into silence. The only sound now was the tiny breaths of the baby. Logan's heart pounded, not with rage, but with the realization that control meant nothing in this room. For once in his life, he felt the unfamiliar sting of fear, not the fear of losing a deal or watching stock prices dip, but the fear of losing something infinitely more fragile: his daughter's trust. He stood still, the man who conquered negotiations with a single signature, rooted by the soft weight of a lullaby that didn't belong to him. For the first time in years, Logan Pierce didn't know whether to speak, to command, or to simply stay and listen. And that silence, the silence of being displaced in his own child's world, was louder than anything he had ever known. Logan didn't move at first. His shadow fell across the nursery floor, long and rigid, broken by the gentle sway of the rocking chair. Maya's small chest rose and fell against the stranger's arm, each breath steady, while Logan's own pulse thundered with the weight of disbelief. This was his child, his world, and yet the calm in the room came not from him, but from the stranger holding her. The woman tilted the bottle just slightly, the kind of small adjustment only someone who had done this 100 times would know to make. Logan's jaw locked. He had paid for the best bottles, the most advanced monitors, a crib engineered with aerospace precision. Yet here, with nothing more than steady hands and a soft voice, this woman had done what he could not. Maya wasn't crying. She wasn't restless. She was at peace. "I made it clear," Logan said finally, his voice cutting through the quiet. "No one touches her without my permission." Marissa didn't flinch. She didn't look away or shrink like so many others did when he spoke with that tone. Instead, she brushed her thumb across the baby's knuckles, her movements firm but tender. "She was crying," she murmured, her voice low, almost like it belonged to the rhythm of the night itself. "Crying to the point of hiccups. I couldn't just watch." Her words landed heavier than he expected. Not defiant, not apologetic, simply true. "Put her in the crib," Logan ordered, his finger pointing toward the polished white cradle across the room. Marissa's head lifted slightly, her steady brown eyes locking onto his. "Now?" she asked softly. Then she gave the faintest shake of her head. "If you put her down right now, the startle reflex will kick in. She'll wake. She needs to feel held long enough to pass that threshold." Logan's lips pressed into a thin line. He wasn't used to being questioned, especially not in his own home. But the way she said it, without challenge, without pride, sounded less like an argument and more like muscle memory, the knowledge of 1,000 long nights compressed into one simple truth. "You talk like you've done this 1,000 times, he said, folding his arms across his chest, trying to rebuild the wall that felt as though it were crumbling. "Once is enough to change someone forever," Marissa replied. Her gaze softened, lowering to the baby nestled in her arms. Maya sighed contentedly, curling closer against her chest, as if to prove her right. Logan's throat tightened. He should have argued. He should have taken back control. But he saw something in her eyes, something he recognized though he hadn't wanted to, the look of someone who had carried a child through loneliness, through loss. "She didn't eat with me tonight," Logan muttered, his voice dropping, the steel in it dimming to something closer to confession. "Because you're tense," Marissa said quietly, without judgment. Her eyes didn't leave the baby's face. "Kids feel that. They don't need perfect. They need safe." The word safe pierced him. It wasn't a word he used. He had bodyguards, bulletproofs, of doors, lawyers who worked through the night. Safety for him was an equation of money and control. Yet what she spoke of wasn't the absence of danger. It was the presence of trust, the kind of safety no lock could buy. Logan's phone buzzed sharply on the changing table. The screen lit up with the name he'd been ignoring all evening, Charlotte Hayes. 3 missed calls, chairwoman of the board. Every part of him screamed to pick it up, to reassert the order of his world. He reached, thumb brushing the glass, then flipped the phone face down. Marissa's eyes flicked toward it. Not with curiosity, not with judgment, just a quiet note, as if filing it away. "You're avoiding an important call," she said evenly, still patting Maya's back in a rhythm as steady as a metronome. "You don't know what's going on in my company," Logan snapped, defensive, the businessman in him resurfacing like armor. "I know when someone's pretending there's no problem," she said, her voice even, steady, not sharp enough to nick his pride, but not soft enough to let him ignore it either. The rocking chair creaked gently, steady, unbothered by his bluster. Logan stared at her, trying to read the layers he wasn't used to seeing. She wasn't polished, wasn't deferential, wasn't afraid. She simply did what was right for the child in her arms. For the first time in a long time, Logan didn't feel the urge to win the tug of war. He only felt the strange, unsettling question rising in his chest. "How do you know what she needs?" His voice came out rough, part challenge, part something else, genuine curiosity he hadn't meant to reveal. Marissa adjusted Maya slightly, cupping the baby's head in her palm with instinctive precision. She didn't look up. She didn't dramatize. She just said the words as if naming the weather. Because I've been there, alone, no one to help. My son lost his father at 2 months. There were nights I didn't think I'd make it. The words weren't dressed up with pity. They were bare, carved from truth. And in them, Logan felt something slip again, the hollow place inside him, the one even billions couldn't fill. His hand went unconsciously to his collar, loosening it as if the room had suddenly grown too tight. For once, logic couldn't buy him safety. Not here, not tonight. Logan's fingers lingered at his collar, tugging at the knot of his tie, though the air was not warm. It was his nerves, rattling in a way they hadn't in years. The boardroom never did this to him. Rivals across the table, lawyers waiting for his slip, they never cracked his rhythm. Yet here, in his own home, a woman in a plain uniform held his daughter as though she had always belonged there. He moved closer, his steps slow and deliberate, the practiced stride of a man who owned every inch of ground he walked. But in this room, the balance of power was off. Maya's cheek pressed deeper into Marissa's elbow, her tiny breaths puffing against the fabric of the uniform, and that small act tethered Logan in place. I said, put her down, he repeated, his voice lower now but with steel threaded through it. He had built empires with that tone. It was the cadence of control. Marissa's gaze lifted, steady and unyielding. Not yet. The words landed like a slap of cold water. No one said that to him. Not assistants, not executives, not even board members. Not yet. They rushed, they scrambled, they obeyed. And yet this woman, with no wealth, no title, no position, sat with his daughter in her arms and told him to wait. Logan's jaw worked, teeth pressing together. This is my house, my rules, my child. Yes, Marissa agreed softly, not backing down. And right now she needs this more than she needs rules. She adjusted the bottle with one last practice tilt, then eased it away as Maya's sucking slowed. She placed the empty bottle on the side table with deliberate care, her every movement measured so the baby never stirred. Then she began to pat her back again, rhythm steady, gentle, almost hypnotic. Logan's arms folded across his chest. He was used to winning, to grinding resistance down until it bent or broke. But the fight here wasn't bending. It wasn't even fighting, it was something else. A wall of calm he couldn't push through. Do you realize what it means, he said, voice clipped, to hold another man's child without permission? Do you have any idea what you've just... Stopped her from crying until she choked, Marissa interrupted, not sharply but firmly. Her eyes flicked to his, then back to Maya. You weren't here. She needed arms, that's all. Her words stripped the argument of its weapons. Logan felt his chest tighten, anger scraping against something softer he didn't want to name. He was never unprepared. He was never caught off guard. But tonight, with his daughter's eyelids drooping, her small body curled in someone else's embrace, he realized control was slipping through his fingers. The phone on the changing table buzzed again. The screen lit up with Charlotte Hayes' name, bold and insistent. Another call, a reminder of the other battlefield that never stopped waiting. Logan stared at it, temptation crawling up his spine. He could answer, step into the familiar war of numbers and leverage, the world where his armor still worked. But then Maya gave a soft sigh against Marissa's chest, a sound so small and trusting that it silenced the buzzing more than his thumb ever could. He reached for the phone, paused, then flipped it face down once more. Marissa's eyes tracked the motion, not with curiosity, not with judgment, simply noting. You keep avoiding her, she said quietly. Logan snapped his gaze to her. You don't know anything about what's happening. Her patting never faltered, the rhythm steady. I don't need to know, she said evenly. I know when someone is pretending there isn't a problem. It looks the same in a corporate tower as it. And yet the echo of those knocks rippled down the hall and into the nursery as if the walls themselves had thinned. Marissa didn't startle. She shifted instantly, her body angling toward the door while still keeping Maya secure against her chest. Her lullaby stopped. Her posture changed. Not just a nanny rocking a baby now, but something harder, sharper, a protector whose instincts had been honed long before this night. "Stay here," she murmured, her voice low but firm. She glanced once at the baby monitor, then scanned the corners of the room with an alertness that reminded Logan of the way his security team swept his offices before board meetings. Logan moved to the wall console, pressing his thumbprint to activate the hallway camera. The screen flickered to life, showing two men in dark suits standing side by side. The suits were expensive but worn, the fabric at the cuffs frayed just enough to betray use. Their chins were lifted in the way of men who relied on intimidation rather than invitation. His chest tightened. These weren't neighbors. These weren't friends. "No one's expected tonight," Logan said quietly. His voice was steady, but the edge in it was new. Less command, more unease. Marissa rose smoothly from the rocking chair, her movements careful not to disturb the baby. She shifted Maya against her shoulder, her free hand brushing the doorframe as if marking her ground. "I'll open it," she said. Logan frowned. "You won't?" But the way she looked at him, steady, unshaken, cut his words short. He found himself nodding, almost against his own instincts. For the first time in this home, he allowed someone else to step in front of him. The door cracked open an inch. The man on the left leaned forward immediately, his voice smooth, rehearsed. "Mr. Pierce, we need to discuss Mrs. Elena Pierce's debt." Logan's late wife, her name hitting the air in his home, like a blade drawn across glass. The man on the right tilted his head, eyes sliding past Marissa's shoulder as if counting doors, searching for a glimpse of the life inside. Marissa didn't block him with force. She didn't need to. She placed her hand lightly against the frame, her stance firm, immovable. Her voice, low enough not to wake Maya, cut through the hallway like ice. "You have 3 seconds to step away from this door." The man sneered. "And you are?" "The person who ends this conversation if either of you looks behind me again." Her face didn't shift, her voice didn't rise, but the authority in her tone was unmistakable. Logan watched, stunned. He recognized the language, risk assessment, controlled escalation, the stance of someone who once wore a badge, who understood leverage not as a theory, but as a daily practice. For a breathless moment, the hallway hung in a taut silence. Then, almost reluctantly, the man on the left stepped back. "We'll be back." "Not tonight," Marissa replied, her hand still on the frame, her eyes never leaving theirs, and never in front of a child's door. The door shut with a quiet finality, the sound no louder than an underline. Marissa locked it, then turned back toward Logan before he could speak. Her voice was softer now, but still threaded with steel. "They're not here for debt. They're here to see if this house has someone at the door." The words slid through him like a shiver. He had thought of debt as numbers, as contracts, as leverage in boardrooms. But in the dim hallway of his penthouse, debt had a face, a stance, a presence. "Leverage," he murmured, the word tasting different here. In the boardroom, it meant pressure on a deal. At the threshold, it meant a child's safety. Marissa nodded once. "Exactly. Tomorrow they may come back with more legal words, but tonight they needed to remember one thing, what St. Anne's is in front of them." Logan stared at her, the hum of the city outside pressing faintly against the glass. He had spent his life believing walls and money made him untouchable. Tonight, for the first time, he realized safety had a different shape. A woman standing at the door, hand against the frame, her voice strong enough to keep wolves from crossing the threshold. Maya sighed in her sleep, oblivious to the war just held at her door. Logan's shoulders lowered, just slightly, and the word safe, so foreign to him, suddenly had a face. The nursery had gone quiet again, but the echo of those knocks lingered in Logan's chest long after the door closed. He had spent years designing this penthouse as a fortress, glass walls that could withstand impact, doors secured with biometric locks, cameras hidden in sleek corners. Yet all it took was 3 knocks and a stranger's voice to expose the hollowness of that defense. Marissa didn't sit back down right away. She scanned the room like a soldier after a breach, eyes on the blind spots, ears tuned to the silence between sounds. With one hand, she held Maya close against her chest. With the other, she reached for the baby monitor, checking the signal, tilting the angle so the light wouldn't shine into the crib. Every move was precise, efficient, born from habit rather than hesitation. Logan leaned against the wall, his arms folded tight, though it felt less like control and more like holding himself together. "They'll come back," he muttered. "They will," Marissa answered, calm and certain, as though she had lived this pattern before. She rocked slightly, keeping the baby's rhythm steady. "But when they do, they'll think twice about who stands at the door." Logan stared at her, caught between disbelief and an unwilling respect. He had expected fear, maybe panic. Instead, she moved through the room with the ease of someone who had stood watch 100 nights before. A few minutes later, Marissa eased Maya into the crib. She laid the baby at a diagonal angle, her palm resting gently on the small chest for exactly 3 breaths before pulling away. The child didn't stir. Logan watched, silent, struck by how simple it seemed when she did it, as if she had memorized the secret steps of a dance he didn't even know existed. Then Marissa reached into her bag and pulled out a small stack of yellow sticky notes. She moved like she was drafting orders in a command center. With a pen, she wrote in crisp, all-capitals letters and stuck the first note onto the door frame. "Door code only open with lily blooms at 3:00. Logan frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" "A passphrase," Marissa replied, her voice still low. "Anyone who really knows you, or me, will know the answer. Everyone else won't. It slows them down, makes them stumble. That pause tells you if the knock is a risk." She wrote another note. "Position: Maya always in nursery. Logan stands to the left of door, out of sight." Logan read it, the sharp strokes of her pen hitting him like terms on a contract, except these weren't financial clauses, they were rules of survival. "Anything you want to add?" she asked, offering him the pen. For a moment, Logan hesitated. He wasn't used to anyone asking him to add to rules. He was always the one dictating them. But here, in his own home, she had written the first lines, and strangely it felt right. He took the pen, steadying his hand against the paper, and added, "Hall camera record continuously. Store for 24 hours. Copy to me." Marissa nodded once. No argument, no approval needed. She peeled the note from the pad and stuck it to the frame of a photo hanging near the door, a picture of Maya, months younger, with her late mother. Logan's throat tightened at the sight, the memory of Elena rushing back like an open wound. Marissa didn't comment. She simply reached for another note and wrote, "Exit route, stairwell B, spare key, right kitchen drawer." Within minutes, the room was layered with quiet instructions, small rituals of safety hidden in plain sight. Sticky notes tucked behind picture frames, slipped into the corner of the fridge, folded into the back of a drawer. Each one a thread, together forming a net that felt more protective than all the technology Logan had bought. "You always do this?" Logan asked finally, his voice softer than he intended. "Night teaches you not to ramble," Marissa said, tucking the pen back into her bag. "Especially when there's a child in the house." Logan almost laughed, a bitter edge to it. "You sound like you don't even need the money." "I need the work," she said plainly without pause. "But here, what matters isn't money. It's doing right by her." She nodded toward the crib. "Money doesn't soothe lungs raw from crying." Her words landed like a weight against his chest. He slipped a hand into his pocket, fingers brushing the barrel of a fountain pen he carried when he needed logic to ground him. But logic felt jagged tonight, useless against the simplicity of her truth. "I'm not good with a bottle," he admitted denly. The words tumbled out before he could stop them. Confession wasn't his language, but it rose from somewhere deeper than pride. "I'm afraid I'll do it wrong." Marissa looked at him for the first time without the edge of command in her eyes. "Most dads I meet are," she said, her tone light but not mocking. "They're used to quick results, smooth charts, clear deadlines. But children don't work on deadlines. They arrive when they want to. The only thing you can control is showing up." Logan stood there silent, the echo of her words filling the room in a way boardroom speeches never could. He realized he didn't fear the bottle. He feared being seen as inadequate in the eyes of the only person who mattered now, the little girl asleep in the crib. The phone buzzed again on the table. This time it was a text from Charlotte. "Logan, answer now. Whitestone has proposed new terms." Logan turned the screen off with a flick of his thumb. For once, the board could wait. Marissa glanced at him. No curiosity, no push, just presence. Then she picked up another sticky note and wrote one final line in sharp letters. "Night belongs to Maya. Outside waits until morning." She stuck it to the inside of the nursery door like a seal. Logan stared at it, a single thought running through him, unfamiliar but undeniable. For the first time in years, he wasn't facing the night alone. The penthouse had finally fallen into a fragile rhythm. The sticky notes Marissa had placed seemed to hum with quiet authority, little yellow lanterns of instruction holding the silence steady. Logan sat in the living room, jacket draped over the arm of a chair, tie loosened, his phone face down for the first time in years. Marissa had stationed herself near the nursery door, her posture calm but alert, as though she could hear the air itself shift if danger tried to creep in. It was almost too calm. Then it happened. A sharp cry pierced the night, high and desperate, slicing through the fragile silence like glass breaking on marble. Logan shot up from the chair, heart pounding against his ribs. It wasn't the usual fussing whimper he'd learned to recognize. This was different, higher, strained. The sound of something wrong. He bolted down the hallway, Marissa already 2 steps ahead of him, moving with the speed of someone who had woken to cries like this before. They entered the nursery together. Maya's small body writhed in the crib, her fists clenched tight, her cheeks flushed red under the amber glow of the nightlight. "She's warm," Marissa said instantly, pressing the back of her hand against the baby's forehead, then to her neck. Her voice was level, but Logan caught the flicker of focus sharpening in her eyes. "Thermometer. Left drawer." Logan's hands fumbled as he yanked the drawer open, pulling out the digital thermometer. He passed it to her like a soldier handing over a weapon, his palms damp with sweat. She placed it under the baby's arm, whispering softly, rocking her just enough to keep her calm. The device beeped, and Marissa glanced at the reading. 38, she said, nodding once. "Mild fever." Logan's throat went dry. "We call the doctor, now. We go to the ER. We—" "Stop," Marissa cut in, her tone still gentle but firm enough to halt his panic. "If we shock her with rushing, she'll spiral higher. We bring it down slowly, no cold water, just warm compresses." She moved with steady precision, already dampening a soft cloth with warm water from a bowl she'd set earlier. She pressed it gently to the baby's neck, then her underarms, wiping in slow, careful strokes. Logan stood frozen, helpless, his chest tight. All his money, all his influence, and in this moment he felt smaller than he ever had. "What if I do it wrong?" His voice cracked without his permission. Marissa glanced up, her eyes steady on his. "You won't if you follow the rhythm. Wipe, pause, count 3. Wipe again." She guided his hand, placing the cloth in it, pressing it lightly to Maya's skin. He followed, shaky at first, then steadier as the baby's cries softened to hiccups. "Good," Marissa murmured. "Now lower the thermostat 1 degree. Not more. Too much." And she chills. Logan obeyed, his movements quick, grateful to be given something tangible to do. When he returned, Marissa was swaying slightly with Maya against her shoulder. The cries had lessened to soft whimpers, but the heat still clung to the child's small body. "Call the pediatric hotline," Marissa said. "Get it on record. Tell them her temperature, her symptoms. While you do that, skin to skin will help regulate her breathing." Logan blinked. "Skin to skin?" Marissa nodded. "Hold her against your chest, shirt off. Babies regulate better when they can feel a heartbeat." For a second, Logan froze, his pride trying to rise, his fear choking him. But then Maya let out another frail whimper, and the choice was no longer a choice. He unbuttoned his shirt with shaking fingers, sliding it off, and reached for his daughter. Marissa passed her into his arms carefully, steadying his hands as he pulled her against his bare chest. The shock of her small, fever-warmed body pressed against his skin nearly undid him. Her cheek rested just below his collarbone, her tiny breaths ragged, her fists unclenching slowly as they adjusted to the rhythm of his heart. Logan held her tighter, his own breathing ragged at first, then slowing as Marissa whispered, "Match her, slow and deep. Let her follow you." He tried. 1 breath, 2, 3. His chest rose, hers followed. His heart pounded, hers softened. Her cries tapered into soft hiccups, then into silence, her body melting into him as if she had been white geese, waiting for this exact embrace. On the phone, the nurse's voice was calm, efficient. "Mild fever, 38 monitor. Keep hydrated. Skin to skin is perfect. Call if it rises above 38.5 or if she shows unusual signs." Logan wrote down every word on the notepad Marissa had left on the side table, his hand trembling but legible. He was used to contracts worth billions, but these instructions, felt like the most important terms he had ever signed. Marissa draped a light blanket over both father and daughter, adjusting the baby's head just so, then slid a pillow behind Logan's back so he could hold longer without strain. She moved like a conductor keeping the rhythm of an orchestra, every detail aligning to keep the fragile peace. Minutes stretched. Logan's heartbeat slowed, steadying. Maya's small body relaxed against him, her breathing evening out, her fever beginning to ebb. Logan felt a tear slide down his cheek before he even realized it. He had been terrified of failing her. But in this moment, with her small weight against his chest, he realized something he'd never dared to believe. He was enough. He looked up at Marissa, his voice hoarse, raw. "Thank you." She only nodded, her gaze soft but unwavering. She didn't need perfect tonight. She just needed safe. And for the first time since Elena's death, Logan Pierce believed he could give his daughter that. The fever broke slowly, like a tide pulling back from the shore. By dawn, Maya's skin had cooled under Logan's palm, her breaths even and steady as she lay curled in her crib. Logan stood over her, still shirtless, his hair mussed, his eyes ringed with exhaustion but clearer than they had been in months. He adjusted the blanket with the same precision he once reserved for signing billion-dollar deals. 3 breaths. Then he withdrew his hand exactly as Marissa had taught him. She watched from the doorway, arms crossed lightly, not with skepticism but with quiet approval. "You're learning," she said, and her voice low, careful not to stir the baby. Logan almost laughed, a short, dry sound that surprised him. "Learning? I've spent 7 years building a company that dominates cloud infrastructure, and last night I realized I didn't know how to lower my own daughter's fever." Marissa stepped into the room, her gaze steady. "You know now. That's what matters." Logan looked at her, searching her face for some trace of judgment. He found none. Only the steady calm that had carried him through the night. He sat back in the rocking chair, exhaling deeply. "In business, control is everything. I've lived by that rule. But last night, I wasn't in control. Not for a second." "You weren't supposed to be," Marissa said simply. She picked up the sticky notes she'd written, tucking one neatly into the edge of the crib frame. "Children don't want control. They want rhythm. Safety isn't about stopping every storm. It's about holding steady through it." Logan turned those words over in his mind. Rhythm. The way she said it made it sound less like advice and more like a law of nature. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed against the nightstand. He didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. Charlotte. Always Charlotte. He flipped it over, confirming her name flashing again and again. He didn't answer. Marissa's eyes flicked to the phone, then back to him. "You'll have to face her," she said evenly. "I know." His tone carried more weariness than defiance. "The board thinks selling off the cloud division will save our stock. They don't understand. It's the soul of the company. Without it, everything else collapses." Marissa tilted her head. "And Charlotte? She doesn't believe in souls, only numbers." He gave a bitter smile. "Numbers are easier to control." Marissa leaned a hip against the changing table, her voice quiet but steady. Last night when those men knocked, they weren't here for money. They were testing something else. Logan frowned. Testing what? Silence, she said. Predators know it. They push to see if you'll blink, if you'll hesitate. If you don't set the rhythm, they set it for you. The word hit him like a key sliding into a lock. Rhythm again. Not just for a baby, not just for fever, for everything. You're saying business is the same as the door, Logan murmured, more to himself than to her. Leverage. Marissa nodded once. Exactly. You know leverage in boardrooms. I know it in hallways. But the principle's the same. If you act like silence is protection, they smell blood. If you set the rhythm, they fall into it. Logan let out a long breath, leaning back in the chair. So what do I do? You already did, she said, her voice softer now. You didn't open the door. You didn't answer at 2 a.m. You held until the right time. She nodded toward the crib. And she's sleeping because of it. Logan studied her, realizing he was beginning to see her less as a temporary presence and more as something else. A shield, a guide, maybe even an anchor. He hated the thought that he needed someone. But in the quiet of the nursery, with Maya breathing steady and safe, he couldn't deny the truth. The soft ping of his phone broke the moment. This time it wasn't a call. It was an alert from the building's security system. Logan picked it up, his brow furrowing. An invalid keycard swipe at the penthouse elevator. Time, 4:19 a.m. His stomach tightened. He tapped for details. The camera had logged it, a black SUV in the garage. Its plate blurred but visible, leaving minutes after the failed attempt. Marissa stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she read the alert over his shoulder. She didn't panic, she didn't gasp, she only said, "They're testing again. Different angle, same question. Who's standing at the door?" Logan's hand clenched around the phone. "Predators," he muttered. "Leverage," Marissa corrected softly. Then she looked at him, her gaze steady, unwavering. "So the real question is, when they knock next, Mr. Pierce, whose rhythm are you going to follow? Yours or theirs?" Logan sat in silence, the glow of the monitor reflecting in his eyes, Maya's soft breaths the only sound in the room. For the first time in his life, the answer didn't feel obvious, but it felt urgent. ChatGPT said, the boardroom smelled faintly of polished oak and stale ambition. Logan Pierce sat at the head of the long glass table, the Manhattan skyline stretching like a battleground behind him. His suit was immaculate, his tie knotted with the precision of ritual. To anyone looking in, he was the same man who had crushed negotiations and bent markets to his will. But inside, something was different. He remembered the rhythm of the night before. 3 breaths over Maya's chest, the steady hum of her breathing, Marissa's voice reminding him that silence wasn't strength. Rhythm was. That thought echoed louder than the buzz of his phone as Charlotte Hayes, chairwoman of the board, cleared her throat. "We don't have time for philosophy, Logan," she said, her tone clipped, efficient. She slid a slim packet of papers across the table. "Whitestone's offer expires in 1 hour. If you don't sign, the share price will plummet. Our shareholders expect leadership, not hesitation." Logan picked up the packet, his eyes scanning the first page. Numbers, projections, clauses buried like landmines, and there, near the bottom, a line granting Whitestone access to Cloud Division's raw data. He felt his jaw tighten. That clause wasn't just business, it was theft dressed as a contract. Charlotte leaned forward, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Sign it. We can't afford to look weak." Logan looked up slowly, the rhythm of his breathing even, deliberate. For once, he didn't feel the old urge to react, to lash back, to crush. He heard Marissa's voice in his mind. "If you don't set the rhythm, they set it for you." "Before we proceed," Logan said calmly, "one question. Has Whitestone ever worked with Vance and Morrell?" Charlotte blinked, just for a fraction of a second, but he saw it, the tiny disruption in rhythm. She recovered quickly, her smile tight. "That's irrelevant." Logan didn't press. He didn't need to. He simply shifted the weight of silence onto the table, letting it stretch until even the air grew heavy. Then he tapped the clause on the page. "This isn't an offer. It's a siphon. You don't give data access to a buyer unless they already know how to use it. Harold Kim, One of the independent directors glanced down at the clause, his brows knitting. I wasn't aware of this line. Nor was I, Marta Rossi, another director added quietly. Her eyes slid toward Charlotte. Logan didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. He simply leaned back in his chair, exhaling in a slow, measured rhythm. Whitestone doesn't want to save our company. They want to gut it. And if we sign this, we hand them the knife. Charlotte's smile thinned. Logan, you're emotional. Your late wife's debts have clouded your judgment. This is business, not sentiment. Her words were meant to wound, but they only steadied him. He remembered Marissa at the door, one hand on Ephraim, saying softly, not tonight, not in front of a child's door. Logan folded his hands on the table, his gaze never leaving Charlotte's. I'll take responsibility for the drop in stock price, but I will not sign away the company's soul to save a quarterly report. If you disagree, put it to a vote. The silence that followed was taut, stretched like a wire ready to snap. Harold was the first to speak. I support an independent committee to review this offer. Marta nodded. As do I. Charlotte's jaw tightened, her fingers curling against the edge of the table. You're all making a mistake. Victor Tan, general counsel, adjusted his glasses. On the contrary, given Logan's concern about potential conflicts, an independent committee is the cleanest solution. Logan felt the weight shift in the room. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't fought to dominate. He had simply held steady, and the rhythm bent toward him. For the first time in months, he saw something crack in Charlotte's mask. Not defeat, not yet, but a hairline fracture. The vote was called. 3-1. Independent committee formed. Charlotte excluded from any discussions involving Whitestone and Vance and Morrell until the review was complete. Logan's pen tapped once against the table, steady as a heartbeat, the same rhythm he had learned cradling his daughter through fever, the same rhythm Marissa had used at the door. He felt his lips curve into a smile, not the cold smile of victory, but something quieter, something truer. When the meeting adjourned, Logan stepped into the hallway. Marissa was there, waiting just outside, her posture relaxed but alert. She didn't ask how it went. She only raised her hand, tapping 2 fingers against her wrist, the same rhythm cue she'd given him the night before. Logan exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders. We held, he said simply. Marissa's lips curved. Antlion. Good. Now let's see if they knock again. And even in the heart of the corporate tower, surrounded by power and greed, Logan understood. He had carried the rhythm with him. And it had changed everything. The penthouse door stood closed, its polished surface reflecting the late afternoon light like a mirror. Logan approached cautiously, Marissa at his side. Maya nestled in her stroller, her tiny fists curled as if the world outside meant nothing. But Logan's gut tightened. Something was wrong. At the threshold, a splash of color broke the sterile symmetry of the hallway. A bouquet of white lilies leaned neatly against the doorframe, wrapped in crisp paper, tied with a black ribbon. It might have looked like a gift, except gifts weren't left at the doors of billionaires. And tucked between the flowers was a small white envelope. Logan stopped dead. His breath hitched, the echo of last night's knocks ringing fresh in his ears. Marissa crouched smoothly, her eyes narrowing. She didn't touch the bouquet. Instead, she scanned it, her posture sharpening into the stance Logan had begun to recognize, protective, calculating. She pulled a pair of thin gloves from her bag, slipped them on with calm efficiency, and angled her phone to snap 3 photos. Wide, mid-range, close-up. Every detail preserved. Only then did she lift the envelope from its place with 2 fingers, careful not to smudge. She held it up, her eyes steady. We don't open this. Logan frowned, his voice low. It's just paper. No, Marissa corrected softly. It's a message, and the way it's delivered is the point. They want you to react here, at your door. That's leverage. We don't give it to them. His chest tightened. He thought of the boardroom that morning. Charlotte's sharp words, the hidden clause in Whitestone's deal. He thought of the elevator swipe at 4:19 a.m. And now this. They weren't just circling his company anymore. They were circling his home. his daughter. Marissa slipped the envelope into a clear evidence bag she pulled from her tote, sealing it with a strip of tape. "Chain of custody starts here," she murmured, more to herself than him. She scribbled the time and date across the tape in firm strokes. "Diego can store it until your counsel picks it up." Logan stared at her, momentarily stunned. "You've done this before." Her eyes flicked to his, then back to the bag. "Yes." No elaboration, just truth. Inside, the penthouse felt tighter than usual, as though the glass walls were bending inward. Logan rolled Maya's stroller into the nursery, the baby sighing softly in her sleep. He adjusted her blanket with trembling hands, pressing his palm against her chest for 3 breaths, just as Marissa had taught him. She stayed calm. He did not. When he returned to the living room, Marissa was at the console, scrolling through hallway footage. The bouquet appeared on screen, the moment it had been placed. A man in a dark suit, his face obscured by a baseball cap pulled low. He set it down, knocked once, then left. The camera caught the edge of a black SUV pulling away. Logan's stomach clenched. "They know where I live. They know she's here." Marissa turned to him, her eyes calm but firm. "They already knew. That's not the point. The point is, they're testing again. They want to see if you'll panic." He raked a hand through his hair, the knot of fear and fury tangling tighter in his chest. "So what do we do? Call the police? Threaten back?" "No." Her voice cut through his panic like a blade through rope. "We set the rhythm. Like last night. Like the boardroom this morning. We don't answer at their timing. We answer at ours." Her words hit him with the same weight as when she'd stood at his door the night before. Rhythm. Always rhythm. She pulled out another sticky note, writing in bold, deliberate strokes before placing it on the fridge. "No one answers the door. All deliveries to legal." Logan stared at the note, then at her. "And if they push harder?" Marissa's gaze softened, though her stance didn't waver. "Then we hold harder. Because predators don't just test the door. They test the heartbeat behind it. Last night you gave Maya your rhythm. Today you gave it to the board. You can give it here too." He swallowed hard, his throat dry. For years he had believed safety was money, power, control. But standing here with a sealed evidence bag on the table and a stranger who somehow understood his world better than he wanted to admit, Logan realized safety was something else entirely. It was rhythm. And right now, his home had found one. Marissa looked toward the nursery where Maya stirred softly in her crib. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "They left lilies, Mr. Pierce. Do you know what lilies mean?" Logan shook his head. "Funerals," she said simply. "They wanted to rattle you." She met his eyes, steady and unflinching. "Don't let them." The words sank into him like iron. He nodded slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just enough to breathe again. He looked at the sealed envelope, then at Marissa. "Then tomorrow, we answer on our terms." And for the first time since Elena's death, Logan Pierce didn't feel cornered. He felt ready. Morning light spilled through the glass walls like liquid gold, but the penthouse felt anything but warm. The bouquet of lilies was gone, bagged, labeled, and handed off to Diego for storage, but its ghost lingered in Logan's mind. Every time he passed the front door, he imagined it sitting there, white petals folded like whispers of a funeral. He had barely slept. But instead of pacing the floors, he had forced himself to sit by the crib, matching his daughter's breaths until the weight in his chest eased. Marissa's sticky notes still dotted the apartment like quiet guardians. Door code lily blooms at 3 o'clock. No one answers. Night belongs to Maya. Now at 8:42 a.m., Logan stepped into the lobby of Alicia Monroe's law office. The walls were veined stone, the reception desk sleek walnut, the air humming with restrained power. Marissa was beside him, posture straight, eyes scanning every corridor and corner like a soldier mapping terrain. Maya was safe upstairs with a vetted sitter Marissa had arranged, another small victory in rhythm. Alicia appeared, charcoal coat over one arm, a thick case file in her hand. Her walk was brisk, her expression sharper than glass. "Ground rules," she said, not wasting a second. 1. This meeting is recorded. 2. All communication goes through counsel. 3. No discussion of your family. 4. If they mention Maya, we end the meeting and file for a restraining order on the spot. Logan nodded, the echo of Marissa's lessons anchoring him. Set the rhythm. Don't blink. Don't give silence to predators. At 9:03, the door to the conference room opened. Vince and Derek stepped in first, the same men who had stood outside his penthouse last night. Their suits were pressed but not fresh, their eyes restless, scanning. Behind them came a younger man with thin glasses and a leather briefcase. He introduced himself smoothly, like an actor playing a role. "Shepard, associate at Vance and Morrell." Alicia gestured toward the table, set a recorder in the center and pressed the button. "Tuesday meeting, 9:04 a.m. Participants as listed. Purpose: establish a legal pathway for claims regarding the estate of Mrs. Elena Pierce." Shepard folded his hands neatly. "We're simply looking for an open conversation, Mr. Pierce. No one wants this spilling into the press." Alicia didn't blink. She pulled out a clear evidence bag and set it on the table with deliberate force. Inside, the lilies, the envelope, the card. "Cooperate and everything stays quiet." "Really?" Alicia's tone was ice. "This is your idea of open conversation? Dropping veiled threats at my client's door at 2 in the morning, sending men to his residence, swiping his elevator card at 4:19 a.m.? She slid a second folder across the table, photos of the SUV, the security logs, stills of the men in the lobby. All documented, all preserved. Vince smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Flowers aren't threats, they're a gesture." From the chair behind Logan, Marissa tilted her head slightly. The smallest motion, but Logan understood it. "Don't bite." So he didn't. He inhaled slowly, his voice even, steady. "You came to my door at night. You left lilies. You swiped my elevator. That's not a gesture. That's testing. And now you have your answer." Shepard adjusted his glasses, his tone softening. "We're here under UCCC 1 to discuss obligations tied to Mrs. Pierce's estate. That's all." "Then keep it to the estate," Alicia cut in, her pen tapping once against her legal pad. "Cloud division, client data, and Whitestone's fishing expedition are off limits." Shepard's eyes flickered just for a beat at the mention of Whitestone, enough of a pause for Logan to feel the shift, rhythm. He had seen it last night in the hallway, felt it at the board table, and now it pulsed here. Derek leaned forward, palms on the table. "What we want is simple. Payment, no games." Victor Tan, general counsel, slid a packet across the table. "Verified obligations of Elena Pierce's estate, payment path through escrow, scheduled disbursements. In exchange, you sign a pledge. No contact with Mr. Pierce's residence, no board outreach, no threats involving a minor. That clause is non-negotiable." Room went still. Shepard's jaw tightened. Vince's smirk faded. Alicia leaned in, her voice low but cutting. "And since you claim flowers aren't threats, you won't object when we subpoena the hosting service behind that gossip blog article. If the trail leads back here, we escalate to harassment injunctions and bar complaints." Logan hadn't said much, but when he did, it came like a hammer. 2 sentences, just as rehearsed with Marissa. "I will settle what's legitimately Elena's. But the door opens here, in this room. Nowhere else." The silence after those words felt different. Heavy. Final. Shepard exchanged a look with Vince and Derek, then finally nodded, his voice clipped. "We'll accept a 30-day standstill agreement while we finalize terms." Alicia slid the papers across. They signed. The recorder clicked off. Meeting adjourned. Out in the hall, Logan leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment. He felt Marissa at his shoulder. She didn't ask, "Are you okay?" She didn't need to. She just tapped 2 fingers against her wrist, a rhythm reminder. Logan opened his eyes, exhaled, and for the first time in weeks, the breath didn't feel like a struggle. The predators had knocked. He hadn't blinked. And as he looked at Marissa, he realized, this war wasn't just about money. It was about proving to his daughter that her world could be safe. The penthouse no longer felt like the echo chamber it once was. The silence had changed. It wasn't the sterile void of loneliness, but the pause of a house catching its breath after a storm. For Logan, that shift was as startling as it was fragile. And when the elevator chimed at 3:40 p.m., the sound carried more weight than usual. Diego had already texted that he was sending someone up. Marissa stood by the door, Maya balanced on her hip, her stance steady but softer than when she faced down debt collectors. The door slid open, and a boy stepped out, backpack heavy on his shoulders, eyes bright but wary, the posture of someone who had grown up watching the edges of every room before stepping inside. "Jordan," Marissa said warmly, her whole expression softening in a way Logan hadn't seen before. "This is Mr. Pierce." The boy looked up at him, caught between awe and formality. "Hello, Mr. Pierce." Logan crouched slightly, lowering himself to Jordan's eye level, resisting the instinct to tower. "Logan's fine," he said, extending a hand. "What's your favorite subject in school?" Jordan's answer came without hesitation. "Math." Marissa's lips curved, almost smiling, but there was something in her eyes too. A subtle recognition that Logan remembered the sticky note from the night before. What's Jordan's favorite subject? Answer, math. He had remembered, and Jordan had just confirmed it himself. A small test passed. Logan chuckled, relief softening his shoulders. "Math, huh? You're going to have to show me your best equations sometime." Jordan's face lit just slightly, the guarded edge melting as he pushed his glasses higher up his nose. "I like building things more than solving equations. Robots, circuits, anything that moves." Logan straightened, exchanging a glance with Marissa. He disappeared into the living room for a moment, returning with a small box. "I bought this a while ago," he said, holding it out. "Never got around to setting it up. Sensor kit. Wires, accelerometer, ESP board. Think you can handle it?" Jordan's eyes widened. His hands reached out, reverent, as though Logan had handed him treasure. "This is really good stuff." His voice trembled with excitement he hadn't meant to show. "Can I?" "Show me," Logan said simply, gesturing toward the dining table. Jordan slid his backpack off, already pulling out a small notebook filled with sketches, codes, half-built diagrams. He spread the kit across the table, his hands moving quickly, confidently. Marissa stood behind him, one hand on Maya's back, the other on the edge of the chair, watching with quiet pride. Logan found himself sitting beside the boy, leaning in as Jordan explained. "If you connect the vibration sensor to the ESP board and set a threshold at 300 millivolts, it'll ping your phone whenever the door shakes too hard, like an alert system. Better than what my building has right now," Logan muttered, half to himself. Jordan grinned faintly, his fingers flying as he connected wires, tapped in lines of code, adjusted the tiny board. Within 20 minutes, a prototype was buzzing faintly on the table, a signal flashing on Logan's phone. Door vibration detected. "See?" Jordan said, almost shyly. "Now, if someone even tries to force it, you'll know before they even knock." Logan stared at the boy, then at Marissa. For a moment he couldn't speak. It was as if the house itself had gained a new pair of eyes, a new layer of protection, crafted not by security firms, but by a child who had learned resilience through necessity. Marissa brushed Jordan's shoulder gently. "Smart and stubborn," she said softly. "He thinks every lock is a puzzle." Jordan ducked his head, embarrassed but pleased. Logan leaned back in his chair, the corners of his mouth youth tugging into something unfamiliar. Not the tight smile of negotiations, but something looser, warmer. "You're hired," he said, lightly. "Head of Household Security, Junior Division." Jordan's eyes widened, then narrowed suspiciously. "Do I get paid?" Logan laughed, a sound that felt foreign and strange in his own throat, but good. "We'll negotiate." For a long moment, the penthouse was filled not with silence, not with the cold hum of glass and steel, but with something else. The soft coo of Maya in Marissa's arms, the scratch of Jordan's pencil against his notebook, the faint buzz of a homemade sensor protecting the door. And Logan realized with something like awe that safety had taken on a new shape. Not walls, not locks, not money, but people. A nanny who knew how to hold a line, a boy who could turn circuits into guardians, a child whose steady breathing reminded him of what truly mattered. For the first time since Elena's death, Logan felt it, not just the absence of fear, but the presence of something greater. Home. The day unraveled into dusk, and by the time the city lights began pulsing against the glass walls, Logan felt the penthouse hum with a strange new energy. It wasn't sterile silence anymore. Jordan's sensor sat discreetly on the doorframe, linked to Logan's phone. Marissa moved through the apartment with the quiet efficiency of someone who had lived through too many long nights to ever let her guard down. And Maya, soft and warm in her crib, breathed in a rhythm that held everything together. For once, Logan didn't dread the night, but he should have known. At 10:12 p.m., the vibration alert pinged, a sharp, insistent buzz that made Logan's chest tighten. Someone was at the door, not knocking, but testing, pressing. Marissa was already in motion, crossing the room in 3 swift steps. Jordan followed close, eyes wide but steady, clutching his notebook like a shield. Logan's instinct surged to throw the door open, to demand, to fight, but he stopped himself. He remembered Marissa's words, "If you don't set the rhythm, they will." He forced his breathing to slow. 1, 2, 3. Then he nodded to Marissa. She pressed a finger to her lips, then gestured for Logan to stand to the left of the door, out of sight. She positioned herself directly in front, feet planted, weight balanced. Jordan slid to the side, close enough to the console to monitor the hallway camera. On screen, Vince and Derek, the same 2 men, their suits more wrinkled this time, their eyes meaner, and between them, someone new, a woman, Charlotte Hayes. Logan's blood iced, his board chair, the one who had told him Whitestone was salvation. She stood outside his door, flanked by predators who had once delivered lilies, and now she was here herself, her hand poised to knock again. The intercom crackled. Charlotte's voice was honey-edged steel. "Logan, open the door. We can resolve this like adults. You've made things harder than they need to be." Logan's jaw clenched, every muscle in his body wanting to storm through the door. But Marissa held up her hand without looking at him. "Wait." Then she spoke, her voice low, unwavering. "This house does not open at night. You know that." Charlotte paused, startled by the voice that wasn't Logan's. "And who exactly are you?" Marissa didn't flinch. "The one who decides whether you leave here tonight with dignity or with security escorting you out." The silence stretched. On the camera, Vince shifted, muttering something to Derek. Charlotte's smile thinned. "You don't know who you're talking to. I run this company's board. I can end Logan's career with one call." From his place just out of view, Logan stepped forward, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "No, Charlotte. What you did tonight, showing up at my home with these men, that ends your career right now." Charlotte's mask cracked. "You think anyone will believe? You?" Logan pulled out his phone, turning the screen toward Marissa. She already had the camera feed recording Charlotte's face, Vince and Derek at her side, the envelope from last night bagged and logged, the bouquet photographed from 3 angles, evidence layered like bricks in a wall. Logan's voice dropped lower, colder. "This isn't a negotiation anymore. You came to my daughter's door. That's not business. That's personal. And I will burn every bridge to make sure the world knows it." For a moment, even Charlotte faltered. Then she tried to recover, her tone clipped. "You're overreacting. This is just a visit." Marissa's voice cut through her lie, steady as stone. "Funeral lilies aren't a visit. Elevator swipes at 4 in the morning aren't a visit. And standing here with 2 men who already threatened a child, that's not a visit. That's predation." Charlotte's eyes flashed, but she said nothing. Logan took a slow step forward, his breathing calm, his words deliberate. "You wanted leverage. You thought fear would make me bend, but you forgot the first rule of leverage. You need something I can't live without. My daughter isn't leverage. She's my line in the sand." The hallway went still. Then Logan raised his phone, dialing. The ring echoed through the intercom. Alicia Monroe's voice answered, sharp and clear. Logan? Charlotte Hayes is outside my door, Logan said. With Vince and Derek. I have video, audio, timestamps. I want harassment and conflict of interest filings prepared before morning. Alicia didn't miss a beat. Consider it done. Tell them to smile. They'll be on record. Logan angled the camera toward the trio. Vince swore under his breath, Derek shifted uneasily, and Charlotte's jaw tightened, her eyes burning. She knew it was over. Marissa opened the door just an inch, enough to let her voice carry like a final verdict. You've tested this door for the last time. The rhythm is set, and it doesn't include you. Then she closed it, the lock sliding back into place with a soft, irrevocable click. Inside, the penthouse exhaled. Jordan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Maya stirred once in her crib, then settled, her tiny chest rising steady. Logan turned to Marissa, his voice quieter now, raw. They thought they could break me by going after her. But you were right. Safety isn't walls. It's stance. It's rhythm. Marissa's eyes softened. And you held it. He nodded, glancing at Jordan, then at the crib. Not alone. The night settled again, not with fear, but with certainty. The predators had revealed themselves, and Logan Pierce, once a man who believed control was everything, now understood the truth. Strength wasn't silence. It was presence. It was people. The final knock had come, and it had been answered.